y'all, it's Sabrina, and for this week's video, I'm talking about the different service opportunities and project possibilities that you may possibly have when you're part of Americorps' NCCC program. I'm going to be discussing the who, what, when, where, why of the project itself, the type of service work you are doing while in this program. Now, of course, a disclaimer, everything I'm going to be talking about and all the photos you're going to see are from my personal experience or from a fellow friends, team leaders, corps members, their experience in the program as well. However, this program differs from year to year, and the communities that you are serving with, the different organizations you're serving with, their needs also change from year to year or even season to season. So while I'm not going to list everything you could possibly do in this program, I am going to give you a lot of information of how your daily work schedule is going to go and the possibilities of the different service aspects and tasks that you will do when you are in this program. As always, there are timestamps below, so let's get started. So first off, let's talk about the who. Who are you actually serving and working with during your NCCC year? So you're going to be serving with organizations that fit under one of three categories. The first is going to be nonprofit organizations, and that can be small organizations that you haven't heard of in communities that you've never been to, or a large organization that you have heard of, such as Habitat for Humanity. The second one will be government organizations, and this is going to be your state or national parks. And the third is Native American tribes and communities. Now, the person who actually requests the team and says, we need a team, we qualify for a team, please come serve with us in our community, that is the sponsor, your project sponsor. However, you may never see your sponsor. You may work side by side with your sponsor every day. Who you're actually serving with is the organization itself. You wouldn't say, I'm serving with Sabrina. You would say, I'm serving with her organization. So I'm serving with Habitat for Humanity, for example. Now, you're gonna notice throughout this video, I'm gonna use the words work and service interchangeably. But when you're in this program, you are serving. They don't like you to use the word work because you're not being paid, you're not working, it's not a normal 9-to-5 job. And they don't like the term volunteering either because you're not just going to volunteer for the day, you are a member of the organization. Therefore, this is service work. But for this video, I'm gonna use them all interchangeably. When you are serving with your organization, the place you're actually serving at is known as your work site. And your work site can be a classroom, it can be a construction site, it can be in the middle of the woods somewhere, anywhere you are working for that day. So you can have multiple work sites at multiple locations. When you are on this site, you may just be working with your team. You may be serving with other members from the community who are volunteering for the day, the week, or the entire time you're on that project, or you may just be working with some people who do work with the organization. More often than not, you will have somebody who is from the organization who is appointed the head person when on the site, and that is known as a site supervisor. These are people that are going to be on your site daily. They're going to work with you. They are the person who gets in touch with the team leader to let you and your team know what your workday is going to be like, what the plan is, what needs to happen. They are not in charge of the team. It's the team leader's job to split up the jobs, make sure everybody's working, and deal with discipline, but they are the main connection that the team leader is going to be working with if there are any problems or to see where everybody's at with everything, just to make sure everything goes smooth. Now, the who of who you're working with, this is a place where flexibility and adaptability really comes into play. You are working with nonprofit organizations. That means, for the most part, they are taking what they can get when they can get it. They are relying on event spaces, donations for equipment or supplies, or community volunteers to donate their time to come and assist them. That means some of them are going to be super organized. They know what you're doing. They have the equipment you need to do it. The time frame's all set out. You're prepared to go. But it also means that you can end up working with an organization that feels super unorganized because they didn't have the equipment in on time, or all of their volunteers left, or the space that they were promised is now given to someone else. Just keep that in mind when you're going out on your projects. Now let's talk about the where. Where are you performing this service work? So with NCCC, there are 4 regions. They do change from year to year. For example, when I was in the Pacific region my first year in Americorps NCCC, Wyoming was a state part of the Pacific region. And now I think it's part of the Denver region, but this is what it looks like at the moment. For the most part, you do stay in your region. You travel all around your region to serve in different communities in the different states that are allocated to your region. However, there is a possibility that you can leave your region. These possibilities come up when there's a specialty project, or most likely in the event of a disaster. If your team is responding to a disaster in a region that is not yours, what probably happened was that region could only spare so many teams, because the rest of their teams need to be on other projects. So one region reached out to the other, requested teams, and off you go to another region to assist in disaster. So in the states in your region, you are living and working with different communities. They may be large communities, they may be small communities. This means you could be living in the outskirts of a city, or you might be living inside the city, downtown LA or Chicago. You may be living in a small town that's way off the map that you've never even heard of, or you may be living in more of a touristy town and serving in that area. It's also possible and highly probable that you are going to be living and serving and working in a place that's way off the map, way off the boondocks, out in the woods somewhere. So basically, you are going and serving wherever there is a high community need, and all communities need something. Getting into the when are you doing this? So you are serving all throughout your 10 months of service throughout that year. That means you are serving during different seasons. So you're gonna be dealing with all different types of weather. You're probably gonna be working in the rain outside, getting muddy. They do provide rain gear, but I will say that rain gear doesn't last too long. You're gonna be working outside in the cold during the winter. You may be shoveling snow for a lot of your projects. You may be working when the snow is coming down in possibly negative degrees. That means at some point you may have to take warm-up breaks during your projects, and if you don't have one on site, you may be warming up in the team van. And then you have your hot days, especially when you're in the summer. You could be working in temperatures up to 90 degrees on the trail when the heat is blaring down on you. This means you're gonna make sure that you are wearing your sunscreen, drinking water, and your team may need to start their daily work at 6 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. in order to beat the afternoon heat. Now, of course, don't get me wrong, you're gonna have your beautiful days, your sunshiny days, you're gonna have projects where you're working indoors. I just wanna make it clear that this is not a program where you can use the excuse, it's raining outside, so we're not going outside. You work in all different temperatures and kinds of weather. Now, there is something called inclement weather plans that you usually have. It's a backup if the weather goes wrong, if you can't get to your work site. However, they're not often used because for the most part, you can be out in the rain or in the heat when you need to be. The NCCC program itself does provide you with proper PPE, which is your personal protective equipment. So this is rain gear, steel-toe boots, gloves, and such. But I will say it's not always the best type of gear, so some things you might want to bring your own, such as safety glasses, gloves, or even sunscreen. Overall, it's important to know this is a no excuses program. You're gonna be outside in the snow, in the rain, in the mud, in the muck, in the middle of the woods, so just make sure you're aware of that and you're prepared. Now let's talk about the how. In this case, how many projects are you gonna have the opportunity to serve on? Depending on what region you're going to, you're either gonna have 3 or 4 rounds throughout your year. These rounds are segments of time that your year is broken down to, and they last anywhere between 6 weeks to 13 weeks, depending on how your campus splits it up. Your projects themselves, they take place within a round. Now, one project can last more than 1 round, maybe a round and a half, or sometimes, but rarely, 2 rounds in total. However, you can also have more than 1 project in a round. This is called a split round. An example of a split round would be, for the first half of that round, you go and you live and you serve in one community with one organization doing a certain task. Then halfway through, you clean up, you pack up, and you ship out to a different location to work and serve with a different community doing different tasks. However, this is not cut and dry. I, for example, have had rounds where I've worked with one project sponsor, I left for a few weeks to work with a different one, and I came back to that same project sponsor. I've also known teams who took 1 round to work with several organizations because they went to a new one every couple of weeks. You really never know. So because of this though, you can have anywhere from 3 to 8 different projects and sometimes even more. That means you're gonna get a chance to work with 3 to 8 or more different organizations in different communities doing different types of service work. One thing that will happen is you may be in the middle of a round and your team leader gets a call when you're on the work site doing your work that says, hey, surprise, your team is now being sent on disaster. So you need to leave the work site, go home, pack up, close out your housing, and be on the road to head to your next project by tomorrow morning. Just because your team gets assigned a project does not always mean that is definitely the project you are going to go on. It's completely possible that when you're preparing for it, they say, hey, actually that project was canceled, you're going on this one now. Or you could be in the van with your team driving to your project and your TL gets a call and says, we're turning around going back to campus, or we're actually taking the highway to go the complete opposite way because our project has been canceled or changed. That doesn't always happen to every team and it doesn't happen super often, but it's still good to note. It's a surprise. Like I said earlier, flexibility and adaptability definitely go hand in hand with this program. I will say in this program, they do their best to to split up the different types of work you're doing. So one team's not always doing the same thing and everyone kind of gets a little bit of a different type of project or service work so you can try out different things and help with different needs. However, it's not perfect. I do know some teams that spent 3 out of 4 of their rounds in the same state. I've known a few people who've gone through the program and they've only done environmental work and they didn't get to do disaster or work with kids or a project they really wanted. It's definitely more common if you work on a campus where they switch teams halfway through the year. Because of that shuffle, it's harder to try to separate what everyone has done in the past to put you on new projects. But like I said, they do their best, and there's a huge chance and probability that you're going to be doing something different with each round that you go to. Staying in the how, let's talk about how much. I am talking about how much service work you are doing with the organization itself. I'm only talking about your normal workday. This is not the extra work you have to do when it comes to team meetings, ISPs, specialty roles. This is only the hours and the work you're putting in when you are working with the organization or the sponsor whose project you are currently on. For the majority of your projects, you are going to be on a project where you are working 5 days on, 2 days off, aka your weekends. For the most part, you're going to be working 8-hour days and have somewhere between a 30-minute to an hour break during your day. Now, this doesn't mean that you're working Monday through Friday with Saturday and Sundays off. It depends on what the organization needs. For example, Habitat for Humanity, their normal work days are Tuesday through Saturday. So your weekends off are going to be Sunday and Monday. Now, while that is the majority of the setup you will have, projects change and differ. There's a possibility that you could be sent on a project where you work 6 out of 7 days a week and your work days are shorter. There could be a project every other Saturday. You guys are on the worksite helping out. Or there are a couple events that end up taking up your days off where you need to help the organization that you're working with. The most amount of hours and days you will work on any specific project will definitely be if you are deployed for disaster. Odds are you will be working 6, most likely 7 days a week for 2 weeks straight with probably a day off every 2 weeks. And you're going to be working 12 to 16-hour days. It can seem like a lot, and it is, but I will tell you, once your round's over, most likely they won't send you on disaster again because you've already worked those high hours and they need to split it up among everybody. Okay, so lastly, let's talk about the what you're actually doing. So all the service project you're going to be serving on, it's all going to be hands-on work, physical labor. Now, there are a few caveats to this. You may get a project that is a tax project where you're behind a desk. Maybe you're sent in disaster, but you're specifically assisting FEMA with all the paperwork and behind the scenes. And more notably, due to the pandemic, you may be doing some type of call center, behind the desk paperwork work to assist with the pandemic. However, for the most part, you are going to be on your feet and it's going to be physically demanding or physically challenging in some way. Now, Americorps NCCC splits their different projects into 5 service areas. And this is urban and rural development, infrastructure improvement, disaster response, which is natural and other disasters, environmental stewardship and conservation, and energy conservation. So your projects are going to fit underneath one of these, if not more. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you here. They're going to want you to memorize these 5 things and be able to kind of give examples possibly of what different projects or types of service work you can match to those. But for the most part, these 5 things, they're not going to be super important to you. However, the reason I'm mentioning them is I'm going to kind of use them to break down the different types of service you can do for this video. So for my categories, we're going to talk about disaster response. Then I'm going to combine urban and rural development with infrastructure improvement just to be urban and rural development. And then I'm going to combine environmental and energy conservation to just be environmental and wildlife. For this section, I'm going to give you a couple of specific organizations that you can possibly be working with because they are popular with NCCC. However, I'm only going to be talking about the different tasks and service work that you have. 2 main reasons for this. 1, like I said earlier, projects and sponsors are completely different from year to year and even season to season. And 2, just because one project is specifically one thing doesn't mean that's all you're going to be doing all the time. So let's get into the different types of service work you are actually going to be doing when you're in this program. First, we're going to talk about disaster response. And right here is where I'm going to make a clarification for you. A lot of people think that FEMA Corps is disaster and NCCC is other hands-on stuff. That's not necessarily completely correct. So FEMA Corps is all disaster response. However, they are behind the scenes. They're doing the paperwork, taking surveys, maybe handing out water bottles possibly, but they are not the hands-on stuff. Like I said earlier, sometimes you can assist FEMA with that stuff, but for the majority, when you're called in disaster, as NCCC members, you are disaster response and disaster preparedness. You're going to be doing 2 different hands-on things. 1, you're going to be doing the preparedness. So this is anything from educating the communities that you're in on what to do in case of different types of disasters, how to remain safe, all the way to filling sandbags to make sure the community is properly prepared. And then the second thing you're going to be doing under disaster is the response. You may be mucking and gutting houses, which is definitely a big one. You could be moving, organizing, and distributing supplies, packaging up food and water to pass out to those in need, or even setting up emergency shelters for those who were affected by the disaster to be able to come and stay in. So as you can see, the type of stuff you're going to do in NCCC is definitely different than you would do in FEMA, and you do disaster response if you were in NCCC. Let's talk about our second category, urban and rural development. And basically anything when you're coming face to face with the community or building in the community, I kind of rolled it all into this category. A couple common organizations that you'll probably work for in this category is Habitat for Humanity and YMCA. So let's talk about construction. There's definitely a high chance that you're going to be on some type of Habitat site. You can start working on a house or a building that's in any phase of the construction. That means you may be starting from the ground up. You get there and there's only a concrete slab laying down. You could be putting up walls, installing windows, flying trusses, working on roofing, putting on doors, you name it, any point of the construction phase, you have a chance to work on. At some point, even if it's not construction, you're probably gonna do some type of painting. This can be painting anywhere from walls and houses to rec centers. Painting's a big one. You're even given paint suits at some campuses. Of course, houses are not the only construction project you can be sent on. You can be constructing anything from wheelchair ramps to permanent shelters for those in need, warehouses, cabins, you name it, you have all those different options at your fingertips. Under that same category, you may be deconstructing something or demolishing something completely. Now, for these types of projects, you are going to be working with tools. But if you're someone who, say, has never used a table saw or a skill saw before, or you don't know different types of tools, during your training at your NCCC campus, you will get a little bit of information during a tool training seminar. If you don't remember much from it, don't worry. When you get on site, and for a lot of these projects, that's kind of how it is with NCCC, you're gonna learn on site. They'll teach you the safety measures, they'll teach you how to use the tools, and you'll be ready and good to go. And of course, it's worth it to mention that if you are working with Habitat for Humanity, you might be working in one of their restores, and the different types of work you may be doing is cleaning, organizing, painting, or refurbishing furniture for them to be able to resell while in their store. Moving away from construction, there are projects that you'll be working with kids and possibly in different schools. Now, you can be working with any age group, all the way from preschool and daycare through high school. If you're working inside schools, you may be tutoring kids after school, or you may be in the classroom assisting teachers when it comes to helping out students who are further behind, or even running educational workshops during that class time. While you're in the schools, you may also be assisting with lunch programs. Maybe you're passing out or putting together both breakfasts or lunches, or maybe even snacks or dinner for students who are unable to afford a school lunch. There are a lot of different things that you can do in schools besides the tasks I listed. For example, I had a project where my team went from school to school, a new one every day, to teach students and show them how to take care of trees, how to wrap saplings so that we could ship them out to be planted all around the US. Still with kids, but outside schools, you can also be a daycare assistant, basically being the staff, watching over and taking care of the kids and performing staff duties. Summer camps is another common one in Americorps. You could be going there for a part of your round to help open the camp. This means anything from painting cabins, reconstructing buildings, setting up games for the kids, testing things to make sure they work and they're safe, or even shoveling snow to make sure that the path is clear and the families and children who are coming to the camp will be safe to use it. And of course, when you're working at summer camps, you can actually serve as camp counselors. This means creating, playing, facilitating games for the campers, taking them from activity to activity, and maybe even teaching them the activities yourself. It also may not be your regular average summer camp that you're used to. There are a lot of different specialized summer camps. Maybe you're serving at a summer camp for foster youth. Maybe you're at a summer camp working with adults with disabilities, or maybe one where you're teaching inner city kids who don't really get to get out and explore the wilderness, all the benefits and the positives of nature. There's possibilities that you could work special events. This may be a specific day or an entire week of two. I know teams that went to the wheelchair games a couple years ago and they absolutely loved it. You can serve in things like the Special Olympics or even different events specifically for veterans. Another place that's common to work is the food bank. So with the food bank, you may be working in their dry goods section, throwing out things that have expired, checking off expiration dates, organizing food pantries, or even in the refrigerator section, sorting through what's expired and what's not, so that you can box things up and help send them out to the community, to the people who need it. Then you can also serve with the homeless community, in soup kitchens, passing out different lunches, or working in or reconstructing permanent shelters for them. Of course, that may not be everything for urban and rural development. Like I said, you really never know till you get there. A couple of random things that I know people have done: making sure houses are boarded up to take care of safety, or going to different homes, knocking on the doors and asking if they would like free efficient light bulbs and installing them to save energy. Or you could be putting up some type of playground material. The urban and rural development and infrastructure type opportunities and service work you can do in this program are definitely vast. Now let's move into environment and wildlife. So for these type of projects, a common sponsor that you may be serving with would be organizations such as nature conservancies or state and national parks. The very first thing on my list almost guaranteed that you are going to be doing some type of invasive species removal project. What is invasive species removal? Basically, you're going into different places in the community where there is a species, some type of wildlife, plant that is not supposed to be there, that is killing the native wildlife that actually needs to remain. So you'll be taking out different weeds and plants, maybe specific grasses that you're pulling out by hand, bagging up, and sending off to be composted or possibly burned later. You're gonna know the names of things like mustard seed or buckthorn. One type of invasive species that you may get is a live invasive species. And I understand plants are living, but I'm talking more about the insects or creatures like caterpillars specifically. I had a round where my team went into the rivers and actually caught different invasive crayfish to euthanize. And I know it sounds bad, but if you actually do the research, these invasive species, these crayfish, were killing the native crayfish that are kind of going extinct. You also could have projects where you are removing native species as well, but that shouldn't be there. For example, like poison ivy. Another task you may perform is kind of a data collection form. This means you may go around marking different plants, whether that means putting a flag in the ground to see where they are or writing it out on a chart. Maybe you're counting how many caterpillar nests have infected the different trees around a park you're working at. Or maybe you're catching snakes and identifying them to see what species are in the area. You could be catching dragonflies or taking photos of bees to see what type of, again, species are in that area. It's also possible that you may be getting in a car and driving around in dusk to count the different deer or fox or animal population wherever you are working. One thing that I never got to do, but one of my friends' team did, they went on a specific bee project. They actually got to deal with the beehives and bee boxes themselves. Then you have planting trees, and there are so many different stages in the tree's life where you could be working for them. Maybe you are wrapping and shipping off different saplings. Maybe you're planting teenage trees, or maybe you're cutting down invasive species around trees in order to help them survive. You may even be making deer cages to put around the trees to make sure they're protected. Then you have more of your agriculture or farming type of work. You could be planting crops like strawberries or onions, or maybe you're gathering crops in order to send them off to the local food bank. You could be collecting seeds from different plants in order to spread them around the community and places where they need to grow. And you will probably even be making the seed sifters in order to do the collecting and dry out the seeds that you get. Maybe you're working in a community garden. This means you could be constructing the garden from scratch. You could be planting in it. Maybe you're doing some weeding, or maybe you're doing some upkeep of the community garden. You could be refurbishing them. Maybe you're putting up some type of shade structure for youth to gather under, for you to teach them how to farm or how to eat healthy, or participate in community garden days. You could be going from place to place or house to house in order to build greenhouses or put up hoop houses for the community to utilize. Another common task is trail building or trail maintenance. Now, trail maintenance specifically usually refers to when you go to a trail that's already been made and you're taking care of it. So you're widening the path for safety reasons. Maybe you're mowing, you're probably gonna weed whack, and you're chopping down things that don't belong in that way. When it comes to trail building or trail construction, odds are you're making a brand new trail, or you're completely redoing a trail that maybe went the wrong way. This can be anything from digging holes and filling holes, creating switchbacks, or digging out water bars for proper drainage. The list goes on and on. And with both trail maintenance and trail building, you can also add things like raking or collecting leaves, all the way to picking up trash around the trails or even in the community. And again, all the different tools you're going to use for different environmental type tasks, you are going to be trained at the beginning of your NCCC training, but also you'll be able to do your training on site when you get there as well. And lastly, under environmental and wildlife, let's touch on animals. So there are very few animal geared type projects in NCCC. I do know teams that have done big cat projects or worked at zoos. And with that, just remember, you may not be actually interacting with the animals, but you may be outside their enclosures, maybe weeding around their enclosures, cleaning debris, or even fixing their enclosures for them. However, there are projects where you do work at animal sanctuaries and help take care of, clean, or feed different types of animals and kind of help stabilize them. That wraps up the what. I want to talk about one more how. How do you get to do the things you want in this program? So here's the thing. In general, it's a complete gamble. You do not know what you're going to do in this program until a couple weeks before you're sent out on that project. That means your year is not planned out ahead for you and you never know what you're going to get. However, if you do not serve on a project that you really wanted to get or do a type of service work you really wanted to do, there's still an opportunity to do it. Americorps NCCC has what's called ISPs, Independent Service Projects. Basically, you can get in touch with a local nonprofit around a community you're serving. You can spend the day working at an animal shelter or working on a habitat site. You can make it happen if you are proactive and want to get it done. So there you have it. There is a breakdown of possible NCCC projects and service work that you're gonna get to do when you're in the program. If you want more information about Americorps NCCC in general, I have their website linked down in the description below. You can also check out the different videos on my channel under service work and volunteering, where I have lots of different informational videos about the program itself. If you're about to do NCCC, good luck. I hope it's a great year. If you already did NCCC, feel free to put some of the stuff you love to do while in the program down in the comments below so people can check out other options that I wasn't able to touch on. And until next time, I hope this helps.